LETTER XXXIII OF Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Vol. IX. This is the Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Vol. IX. By Samuel Richardson. Letter XXXIII. Mr. Belford to Mr. James Harlowe, Jr., Esq. Saturday, September 16. Sir, you will excuse my plain dealing in turn. For I must observe, that if I had not the just opinion I have of the sacred nature of this office I have undertaken, some passages in the letter you have favoured me with would convince me that I ought not to excuse myself from acting in it. I need only name one of them. You are pleased to say that your uncles, if the trust be relinquished to them, will treat with me through Colonel Morden as to the points they will undertake to perform. Permit me, Sir, to say, that it is the duty of an executor to see every point performed that can be performed. Nor will I leave the performance of mine to any other persons, especially where a qualifying is so directly intimated, and where all the branches of your family have shown themselves, with respect to the incomparable lady, to have but one mind. You are pleased to urge, that she recommends to me the leaving to the honour of any of your family such of the articles as are of a domestic nature. But admitting this to be so, does it not imply that the other articles are still to obtain my care? But even these, you will find by the will, she gives not up; and to that I refer you. I am sorry for the hints you give of an opposition where, as you say, there might be none, if I did not interfere. I see not, Sir, why your animosity against a man who cannot be defended should be carried to such a height against one who never gave you offence; and this only because he is acquainted with that man. I will not say all I might say on this occasion. As to the legacy to myself, I assure you, Sir, that neither my circumstances nor my temper will put me upon being a gainer by the executorship. I shall take pleasure to tread in the steps of the admirable testatrix in all I may, and rather will increase than diminish her poor's fund. With regard to the trouble that may attend the execution of the trust, I shall not, in honour to her memory, value 10 times more than this can give me. I have indeed 2 other executorships on my hands, but they sit light upon me, and survivors cannot better or more charitably bestow their time. I conceive that every article, but that relating to the poor's fund, such is the excellence of the disposition of the most excellent of women, may be performed in 2 months' time at furthest. Occasions of litigation or offence shall not proceed from me. You need only apply to Colonel Morden, who shall command me in every thing that the will allows me to oblige your family in. I do assure you that I am as unwilling to obtrude myself upon it as any of it can wish. I own that I have not yet proved the will, nor shall I do it till next week at soonest, that you may have time for amicable objections, if such you think fit to make, through the Colonel's mediation. But let me observe to you, Sir, that an executor's power, in such instances as I have exercised it, is the same before the probate as after it. He can even, without taking that out, commence an action, although he cannot declare upon it; and these acts of administration make him liable to actions himself. I am therefore very proper in the steps I shall have taken in part of the execution of this sacred trust, and want not allowance on the occasion. Permit me to add, that when you have perused the will and coolly considered every thing, it is my hope that you will yourself be of opinion that there can be no room for dispute or opposition; and that if your family will join to expedite the execution, it will be the most natural and easy way of shutting up the whole affair, and to have done with a man so causelessly, as to his own particular, the object of your dislike, as is, Sir, Your very humble servant, notwithstanding, John Belford. The will, to which the following preamble, written on a separate paper, was stitched in black silk. To my executor. I hope I may be excused for expatiating, in divers parts of this solemn last act, upon subjects of importance; for I have heard of so many instances of confusion and disagreement in families, and so much doubt and difficulty, for want of absolute clearness in the testaments of departed persons, that I have often concluded, were there to be no other reasons but those which respect the peace of surviving friends, that this last act, as to its designation and operation, ought not to be the last in its composition or making, but should be the result of cool deliberation, and, as is more frequently than justly said, of a sound mind and memory, which too seldom are to be met with but in sound health. All pretences of insanity of mind are likewise prevented, when a testator gives reasons for what he wills. All cavils about words are obviated, the obliged are assured, and they enjoy the benefit for whom the benefit was intended. Hence have I, for some time past, employed myself in penning down heads of such a disposition, which, as reasons offered, I have altered and added to, so that I was never absolutely destitute of a will, had I been taken off ever so suddenly. These minutes and imperfect sketches enabled me, as God has graciously given me time and sedateness, to digest them into a form in which they appear. I, Clarissa Harlowe, now, by strange melancholy accidents, lodging in the parish of St. Paul, Covent Garden, being of sound and perfect mind and memory, as I hope these presents, drawn up by myself, and written with my own hand, will testify, do, this 2nd day of September, (a blank at the writing was left for this date, and filled up on this day,) in the year of our Lord, the date of the year is left blank for particular reasons. Make and publish this my last will and testament in manner and form following. In the first place, I desire that my body may lie unburied 3 days after my decease, or till the pleasure of my father be known concerning it. But the occasion of my death not admitting of doubt, I will not, on any account, that it be opened, and it is my desire that it shall not be touched but by those of my own sex. I have always earnestly requested that my body might be deposited in the family vault with those of my ancestors. If it might be granted, I could now wish that it might be placed at the feet of my dear and honoured grandfather. But as I have, by one very unhappy step, been thought to disgrace my whole lineage, and therefore this last honour may be refused to my corpse, in this case my desire is, that it may be interred in the churchyard belonging to the parish in which I shall die, and that in the most private manner, between the hours of 11 and 12 at night, attended only by Mrs. Lovick and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and their maidservant. But it is my desire that the same fees and dues may be paid, which are usually paid for those who are laid in the best ground, as it is called, or even in the chancel. And I bequeath 5 to be given, at the discretion of the churchwardens, to 20 poor people, the Sunday after my interment, and this whether I shall be buried here or elsewhere. I have already given verbal directions, that after I am dead, and laid out in the manner I have ordered, I may be put into my coffin as soon as possible. It is my desire that I may not be unnecessarily exposed to the view of any body, except any of my relations should vouchsafe, for the last time, to look upon me. And I could wish, if it might be avoided without making ill will between Mr. Lovelace and my executor, that the former might not be permitted to see my corpse. But if, as he is a man very uncontrollable, and as I am nobody's, he insist upon viewing her dead, whom he once before saw in a manner dead, let his gay curiosity be gratified. Let him behold and triumph over the wretched remains of one who has been made a victim to his barbarous perfidy. But let some good person, as by my desire, give him a paper, whilst he is viewing the ghastly spectacle, containing these few words only: Gay, cruel heart, behold here the remains of the once ruined, yet now happy, Clarissa Harlowe. See what thou thyself must quickly be, and repent. Yet, to show that I die in perfect charity with all the world, I do most sincerely forgive Mr. Lovelace the wrongs he has done me. If my father can pardon the errors of his unworthy child, so far as to suffer her corpse to be deposited at the feet of her grandfather, as above requested, I could wish, my misfortunes being so notorious, that a short discourse be pronounced over my remains before they be interred. The subject of the discourse I shall determine before I conclude this writing. So much written about what deserves not the least consideration, and about what will be nothing when this writing comes to be opened and read, will be excused, when my present unhappy circumstances and absence from all my natural friends are considered. And now, with regard to the worldly matters which I shall die possessed of, as well as to those which of right appertain to me, either by the will of my said grandfather, or otherwise, thus do I dispose of them. In the first place, I give and bequeath all the real estates in or to which I have any claim or title by the said will, to my ever honoured father, James Harlowe, Esq., and that rather than to my brother and sister, to whom I had once thoughts of devising them, because, if they survive my father, those estates will assuredly vest in them, or one of them, by virtue of his favour and indulgence, as the circumstances of things with regard to marriage settlements or otherwise may require, or as they may respectively merit by the continuance of their duty. The house, late my grandfather's, called the Grove, and by him, in honour of me, and of some of my voluntary employments, my dairy house, and the furniture thereof as it now stands, the pictures and large iron chest of old plate excepted, I also bequeath to my said father, only begging it as a favour that he will be pleased to permit my dear Mrs. Norton to pass the remainder of her days in that house, and to have and enjoy the apartments in it known by the name of the housekeeper's apartments, with the furniture in them, and which, plain and neat, was bought for me by my grandfather, who delighted to call me his housekeeper, and which therefore in his lifetime I used as such, the office to go with the apartments. And as I am the more earnest in this recommendation, as I had once thought to have been very happy there with the good woman, and because I think her prudent management will be as beneficial to my father, as his favour can be convenient to her. But with regard to what has accrued from that estate since my grandfather's death, and to the sum of 970£, which proved to be the moiety of the money that my said grandfather had by him at his death, and which moiety he bequeathed to me for my sole and separate use, as he did the other moiety in like manner to my sister, and which sum, that I might convince my brother and sister that I wished not for an independence upon my father's pleasure, I gave into my father's hands, together with the management and produce of the whole estate devised to me. These sums, however considerable when put together, I hope I may be allowed to dispose of absolutely, as my love and gratitude, not confined only to my own family, which is very wealthy in all its branches, may warrant; and which therefore I shall dispose of in the manner hereafter mentioned, But it is my will and express direction, that my father's account of the above mentioned produce may be taken and established absolutely, and without contravention or question, as he shall be pleased to give it to my cousin Morden, or to whom else he shall choose to give it; so as that the said account be not subject to litigation, or to the controul of my executor, or of any other person. My father, of his love and bounty, was pleased to allow me the same quarterly sums that he allowed my sister for apparel and other requisites; and pleased with me then used to say, that those sums should not be deducted from the estate and effects bequeathed to me by my grandfather. But having mortally offended him, as I fear it may be said, by one unhappy step, it may be expected that he will reimburse himself those sums. It is therefore my will and direction that he shall be allowed to pay and satisfy himself for all such quarterly or other sums which he was so good as to advance me from the time of my grandfather's death; and that his account of such sums shall likewise be taken without questioning. The money, however, which I left behind me in my escritoire, being to be taken in part of those disbursements. My grandfather, who, in his goodness and favour to me, knew no bounds, was pleased to bequeath to me all the family pictures at his late house, some of which are very masterly performances; with command, that if I died unmarried, or if married and had no descendants, they should then go to that son of his, if more than one should be then living, whom I should think would set most value by them. Now, as I know that my honoured uncle, Mr. John Harlowe, Esq., was pleased to express some concern that they were not left to him as eldest son, and as he has a gallery where they may be placed to advantage, and as I have reason to believe that he will bequeath them to my father, if he survive him, who, no doubt, will leave them to my brother, I therefore bequeath all the said family pictures to my said uncle John Harlowe. In these pictures, however, I include not one of my own, drawn when I was about 14 years of age, which I shall hereafter in another article bequeath. My said honoured grandfather, having a great fondness for the old family plate, which he would never permit to be changed, having lived, as he used to say, to see a great deal of it come into request again in the revolution of fashions, and having left the same to me, with a command to keep it entire, and with power at my death to bequeath it to whomsoever I pleased that I thought would forward his desire, which was, as he expresses it, that it should be kept to the end of time, this family plate, which is deposited in a large iron chest in the strong room at his late dwelling house, I bequeath entire to my honoured uncle Antony Harlowe, Esq., with the same injunctions which were laid on me, not doubting but he will confirm and strengthen them by his own last will. I bequeath to my ever valued friend Mrs. Judith Norton, to whose piety and care, seconding the piety and care of my ever honoured and excellent mother, I owe, morally speaking, the qualifications which for 18 years of my life made me beloved and respected, the full sum of 600£, to be paid her within 3 months after my death. I bequeath also to the same good woman 30 guineas, for mourning for her and for her son, my foster brother. To Mrs. Dorothy Hervey, the only sister of my honoured mother, I bequeath the sum of 50 guineas for a ring; and I beg of her to accept of my thankful acknowledgements for all her goodness to me from my infancy, and particularly for her patience with me in the several altercations that happened between my brother and sister and me before my unhappy departure from Harlowe place. To my kind and much valued cousin, Miss Dolly Hervey, daughter of my aunt Hervey, I bequeath my watch and equipage, and my best Mechlin and Brussels head dresses and ruffles; also my gown and petticoat of flowered silver of my own work, which having been made up but a few days before I was confined to my chamber, I never wore. To the same young lady I bequeath likewise my harpsichord, my chamber organ, and all my music books. As my sister has a very pretty library, and as my beloved Miss Howe has also her late father's as well as her own, I bequeath all my books in general, with the cases they are in, to my said cousin Dolly Hervey. As they are not ill chosen for a woman's library, I know that she will take the greater pleasure in them, when her friendly grief is mellowed by time into a remembrance more sweet than painful, because they were mine, and because there are observations in many of them of my own writing, and some very judicious ones written by the truly Reverend Dr. Lewen. I also bequeath to the same young lady 25 guineas for a ring, to be worn in remembrance of her true friend. If I live not to see my worthy cousin William Morden, Esq., I desire my humble and grateful thanks may be given to him for his favours and goodness to me, and particularly for his endeavours to reconcile my other friends to me at a time when I was doubtful whether he would forgive me himself. As he is in great circumstances, I will only beg of him to accept of 2 or 3 trifles, in remembrance of a kinswoman who always honoured him as much as he loved her; particularly of that piece of flowers which my uncle Robert, his father, was very earnest to obtain, in order to carry it abroad with him. I desire him likewise to accept of the little miniature picture set in gold, which his worthy father made me sit for to the famous Italian master whom he brought over with him, and which he presented to me, that I might bestow it, as he was pleased to say, upon the man whom I should be one day most inclined to favour. To the same gentleman I also bequeath my rose diamond ring, which was a present from his good father to me, and will be the more valuable to him on that account. I humbly request Mrs. Annabella Howe, the mother of my dear Miss Howe, to accept of my respectful thanks for all her favours and goodness to me, when I was so frequently a visiter to her beloved daughter; and of a ring of 25 guineas price. My picture at full length, which is in my late grandfather's closet, excepted in an article above from the family pictures, drawn when I was near 14 years of age, about which time my dear Miss Howe and I began to know, to distinguish, and to love one another so dearly, I cannot express how dearly, I bequeath to that sister of my heart, of whose friendship, as well in adversity as prosperity, when I was deprived of all other comfort and comforters, I have had such instances, as that our love can only be exceeded in that state of perfection, in which I hope to rejoice with her hereafter to all eternity. I bequeath also to the same dear friend my best diamond ring, which, with other jewels, is in the private drawer of my escritoire; as also all my finished and framed pieces of needlework, the flower piece excepted, which I have already bequeathed to my cousin Morden. These pieces have all been taken down, as I have heard, and my relations will have no heart to put them up again: but if my good mother chooses to keep back any one piece, the above capital piece, as it is called, excepted, not knowing but some time hence she may bear the sight of it, I accept that also from this general bequest, and direct it to be presented to her. My whole length picture in the Vandyke taste, that used to hang in my own parlour, as I was permitted to call it, I bequeath to my aunt Hervey, except my mother should think fit to keep it herself. I bequeath to the worthy Charles Hickman, Esq., the locket, with a miniature picture of the lady he best loves, which I have constantly worn, and shall continue to wear next my heart till the approach of my last hour. It must be the most acceptable present that can be made him, next to the hand of the dear original. And, O my dear Miss Howe, let it not be long before you permit his claim to the latter; for indeed you know not the value of a virtuous mind in that sex, and how preferable such a mind is to one distinguished by the more dazzling flights of unruly wit, although the latter were to be joined by that specious outward appearance, which too often attracts the hasty eye and susceptible heart. Permit me, my dear friends, this solemn apostrophe, in this last solemn act, to a young lady so deservedly dear to me. I make it my earnest request to my dear Miss Howe, that she will not put herself into mourning for me: but I desire her acceptance of a ring with my hair, and that Mr. Hickman will also accept of the like, each of the value of 25 guineas. I bequeath to Lady Betty Lawrance, and to her sister Lady Sarah Sadleir, and to the Right Honourable Lord M., and to their worthy nieces, Miss Charlotte and Miss Martha Montague, each an enamelled ring, with a cipher CL.H., with my hair in crystal, and round the inside of each the day, month, and year of my death; each ring with brilliants, to cost 20 guineas. And this as a small token of the grateful sense I have of the honour of their good opinions and kind wishes in my favour, and of their truly noble offer to me of a very considerable annual provision, when they apprehended me to be entirely destitute of any. To the Reverend and learned Dr. Arthur Lewen, by whose instructions I have been equally delighted and benefited, I bequeath 20 guineas for a ring. If it should please God to call him to himself before he can receive this small bequest, it is my will that his worthy daughter may have the benefit of it. In token of the grateful sense I have of the civilities paid me by Mrs. and Miss Howe's domestics from time to time in my visits there, I bequeath 30 guineas to be divided among them, as their dear young mistress shall think proper. To each of my worthy companions and friends, Miss Biddy Lloyd, Miss Fanny Alston, Miss Rachel Biddulph, and Miss Cartwright Campbell, I bequeath 5 guineas for a ring. To my late maid servant, Hannah Burton, an honest faithful creature, who loved me, reverenced my mother, and respected my sister, and never sought to do any thing unbecoming of her character, I bequeath the sum of 50 to be paid within 1 month after my decease, she labouring under ill health; and if that ill health continue, I commend her for further assistance to my good Mrs. Norton, to be put upon my poor's fund, hereafter to be mentioned. To the coachman, groom, and 2 footmen, and 5 maids at Harlowe place, I bequeath 10 each; to the helper 5 To my sister's maid, Betty Barnes, I bequeath 10 to show that I resent no former disobligations, which I believe were owing more to the insolence of office, and to natural pertness, than to personal ill will. All my wearing apparel, of whatever sort, that I have not been obliged to part with, or which is not already bequeathed, my linen excepted, I desire Mrs. Norton to accept of. The trunks and boxes in which my clothes are sealed up, I desire may not be opened, but in presence of Mrs. Norton, or of some one deputed by her, and of Mrs. Lovick. To the worthy Mrs. Lovick, above mentioned, from whom I have received great civilities, and even maternal kindnesses, and to Mrs. Smith, with whom I lodge, from whom also I have received great kindnesses, I bequeath all my linen, and all my unsold laces, to be divided equally between them, as they shall agree; or, in case of disagreement, the same to be sold, and the money arising to be equally shared by them. And I bequeath to the same good gentlewomen, as a further token of my thankful acknowledgements of their kind love and compassionate concern for me, the sum of 20 guineas each. To Mr. Smith, the husband of Mrs. Smith above named, I bequeath the sum of 10 guineas, in acknowledgement of his civilities to me. To Catherine, the honest maid servant of Mrs. Smith, to whom, having no servant of my own, I have been troublesome, I bequeath 5 guineas, and 10 guineas more, in lieu of a suit of my wearing apparel, which once, with some linen, I thought of leaving to her. With this she may purchase what may be more suitable to her liking and degree. To the honest and careful widow, Anne Shelburne, my nurse, over and above her wages, and the customary perquisites that may belong to her, I bequeath the sum of 10 guineas. Here is a careful, and, to persons of such humanity and tenderness, a melancholy employment, attended in the latter part of life with great watching and fatigue, which is hardly ever enough considered. The few books I have at my present lodgings I desire Mrs. Lovick to accept of, and that she be permitted, if she please, to take a copy of my book of meditations, as I used to call it, being extracts from the best of books, which she seemed to approve of, although suited particularly to my own case. As for the book itself, perhaps my good Mrs. Norton will be glad to have it, as it is written with my own hand. In the middle drawer of my escritoire at Harlowe place are many letters and copies of letters, put up according to their dates, which I have written or received in a course of years, ever since I learned to write, from and to my grandfather, my father and mother, my uncles, my brother and sister, on occasional little absences, my late uncle Morden, my cousin Morden, Mrs. Norton, and Miss Howe, and other of my companions and friends, before my confinement at my father's; as also from the 3 reverend gentlemen, Dr. Blome, Mr. Arnold, and Mr. Tomkins, now with God, and the very reverend Dr. Lewen, on serious subjects. As these letters exhibit a correspondence that no person of my sex need to be ashamed of, allowing for the time of life when mine were written, and as many excellent things are contained in those written to me, and as Miss Howe, to whom most of them have been communicated, wished formerly to have them, if she survived me, for these reasons I bequeath them to my said dear friend Miss Anna Howe, and the rather, as she had for some years past a very considerable share in the correspondence. I do hereby make, constitute, and ordain John Belford of Edgware, in the county of Middlesex, Esquire, the sole executor of this my last will and testament, having previously obtained his leave to do so. I have given the reasons which induced me to ask this gentleman to take upon him this trouble to Miss Howe. I therefore referred to her on this subject. But I do most earnestly beg of him, the said Mr. Belford, that in the execution of his trust he will, as he has repeatedly promised, studiously endeavour to promote peace with and suppress resentments in every one, so that all further mischiefs may be prevented as well from as to his friend. And in order to this, I beseech him to cultivate the friendship of my worthy cousin Morden, who, as I presume to hope, when he understands it to be my dying request, will give him his advice and assistance in every article where it may be necessary, and who will perhaps be so good as to interpose with my relations, if any difficulty should arise about carrying out some of the articles of this my last will into execution, and to soften them into the wished for condescension. For it is my earnest request to Mr. Belford, that he will not seek by law, or by any sort of violence, either by word or deed, to extort the performance from them. If there be any articles of a merely domestic nature, that my relations shall think unfit to be carried into execution, such articles I leave entirely to my said cousin Morden and Mr. Belford to vary, or totally dispense with, as they shall agree upon the matter; or if they two differ in opinion, they will be pleased to be determined by a third person, to be chosen by them both. Having been pressed by Miss Howe and her mother to collect the particulars of my sad story, and given expectation that I would, in order to do my character justice with all my friends and companions, but not having time before me for the painful task, it has been a pleasure for me to find, by extracts kindly communicated to me by my said executor, that I may safely trust my fame to the justice done me by Mr. Lovelace, in his letters to him, my said executor. And as Mr. Belford has engaged to contribute what is in his power towards a compliment to be made of all that relates to my story, and knows my whole mind in this respect, it is my desire that he will cause 2 copies to be made of this collection, one to remain with Miss Howe, the other with himself, and that he will show or lend his copy, if required, to my aunt Hervey, for the satisfaction of any of my family, but under such restrictions as the said Mr. Belford shall think fit to impose, that neither any other person's safety may be endangered, nor his own honour suffer, by the communication. I bequeath to my said executor the sum of 100 guineas, as a grateful though insufficient acknowledgement of the trouble he will be at in the execution of the trust he has so kindly undertaken. I desire him likewise to accept of 20 guineas for a ring, and that he will reimburse himself for all the charges and expenses which he shall be at in the execution of this trust. In the worthy Dr. H. I have found a physician, a father, and a friend. I beg of him, as a testimony of my gratitude, to accept of 20 guineas for a ring. I have the same obligations to the kind and skilful Mr. Goddard, who attended me as my apothecary. His very moderate bill I have discharged down to yesterday. I have always thought it incumbent upon testators to shorten all they can the trouble of their executors. I know I underrate the value of Mr. Goddard's attendances, when over and above what may accrue from yesterday, to the hour that will finish all, I desire 15 guineas for a ring may be presented to him. To the Reverend Mr., who frequently attended me, and prayed by me in my last stages, I also bequeath 15 guineas for a ring. There are a set of honest indigent people whom I used to call my poor, and to whom Mrs. Norton conveys relief each month, or at shorter periods, in proportion to their necessities, from a sum I deposited in her hands, and from time to time recruited as means accrued to me, but now nearly, if not wholly, expended. Now, that my fault may be as little aggravated as possible by the sufferings of the worthy people whom Heaven gave me a heart to relieve, and as the produce of my grandfather's estate, including the moiety of the sums he had by him, and was pleased to give me at his death as above mentioned, together with what I shall further appropriate to the same use in the subsequent articles, will, as I hope, more than answer all my legacies and bequests. It is my will and desire that the remainder, be it little or much, shall become a fund to be appropriated, and I hereby direct that it be appropriated to the like purposes with the sums which I put into Mrs. Norton's hands, as aforesaid, and this under the direction and management of the said Mrs. Norton, who knows my whole mind in this particular. And in case of her death, or of her desire to be acquitted of the management thereof, it is my earnest request to my dear Miss Howe, that she will take it upon herself, and that, at her own death, she will transfer what shall remain undisposed of at the time to such persons, and with such limitations, restrictions, and provisos, as she shall think will best answer my intention. For as to the management and distribution of all or any part of it, while in Mrs. Norton's hands or her own, I will that it be entirely discretional and without account, either to my executor or any other person. Although Mrs. Norton, as I have hinted, knows my whole mind in this respect, yet it may be proper to mention, in this solemn last act, that my intention is, that this fund be entirely set apart and appropriated to relieve temporarily from the interest thereof, as I dare say it will be put out to the best advantage, or even from the principal, if need be, the honest, industrious, labouring poor only, when sickness, lameness, unforeseen losses, or other accidents, disable them from following their lawful callings, or to assist such honest people of large families as shall have a child of good inclinations, to put out to service, trade, or husbandry. It has always been a rule with me, in my little donations, to endeavour to aid and set forward the sober and industrious poor. Small helps, if seasonably afforded, will do for such, and so the fund may be of more extensive benefit. An ocean of wealth will not be sufficient for the idle and dissolute, whom therefore, since they will always be in want, it will be no charity to relieve, if worthier creatures would, by relieving the others, be deprived of such assistance as may set the wheels of their industry going, and put them in a sphere of useful action. But it is my express will and direction, that let this fund come out to be ever so considerable, it shall be applied only in support of the temporary exigencies of the persons I have described, and that no one family or person receive from it, at one time, or in 1 year, more than the sum of 20 pounds. It is my will and desire that the set of jewels which was my grandmother's and presented to me soon after her death be valued, and the worth of them paid to my executor, if any of my family choose to have them; or otherwise that they should be sold, and go to the augmentation of my poor's fund. But if they may be deemed an equivalent for the sums my father was pleased to advance to me since the death of my grandfather, I desire that they may be given to him. I presume, that the diamond necklace, solitaire, and buckles, which were properly my own, presented by my mother's uncle, Sir Josias Brookland, will not be purchased by any one of my family, for a too obvious reason. In this case I desire that they may be sent to the best advantage, and apply the money to the uses of my will. In the beginning of this tedious writing, I referred to the latter part of it, the naming of the subject of the discourse which I wish might be delivered at my funeral, if permitted to be interred with my ancestors. I think the following will be suitable to my case. I hope the alteration of the words her and she for him and he may be allowable. Let not her that is deceived trust in vanity, for vanity shall be her recompense. She shall be accomplished before her time, and her branch shall not be green. She shall shake off her unripe grape as the vine, and shall cut off her flower as the olive. Job chapter 15, verses 31, 32, 33. But if I am to be interred in town, let only the usual burial service be read over my corpse. If my body be permitted to be carried down, I bequeath 10 pounds to be given to the poor of the parish, at the discretion of the churchwardens, within a fortnight after my interment. If any necessary matter be omitted in this my will, or if any thing appear doubtful or contradictory, as possibly may be the case, since besides my inexperience in these matters, I am now at this time very weak and ill, having put off the finishing hand a little too long, in hopes of obtaining the last forgiveness of my honoured friend, in which case I should have acknowledged the favour with a suitable warmth of duty, and filled up some blanks which I left to the very last, in a more agreeable manner to myself than now I have been enabled to do. In case of such omissions and imperfections, I desire that my cousin Morden will be so good as to join with Mr. Belford in considering them, and in comparing them with what I have more explicitly written; and if after that any doubt remain, that they will be pleased to apply to Miss Howe, who knows my whole heart. And I desire that the construction of these 3 may be established; and I hereby establish it, provided it be unanimous, and direct it to be put in force, as if I had so written and determined myself. And now, O my blessed Redeemer, do I, with a lively faith, humbly lay hold of thy meritorious death and sufferings, hoping to be washed clean in thy precious blood from all my sins, in the bare hope of the happy consequences of which, how light do those sufferings seem, grievous as they were at the time, which, I confidently trust, will be a mean, by the grace, to work out for me a more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Clarissa Harlowe. Signed, sealed, published, and declared, the day and year above written, by the said Clarissa Harlowe, as her last will and testament, contained in 7 sheets of paper, all written with her own hand, and every sheet signed and sealed by herself, in the presence of us, John Williams, Arthur Bedell, Elizabeth Swanton. End of Letter XXXIII.